Meeting to order. We have a roll call, Kristen.
Yep.
Can we have a public comment before we start tonight? Anybody wishing to say anything, state your name, where you live, and try to keep it to 3 minutes apiece. Okay? We've got a lot here to go through tonight. Okay? Anybody?
Good evening. Thank you for having us all here. My name is Nicole Dillingham. I live in Springfield Center, and I see that on the agenda today, well, actually, before I get to the agenda, I did want to raise one issue with the planning board and some members of the town board who might be here, and that is that I don't know yet, has Dominion filed an application in connection with this project? And does the public have access to it? We have, been trying to get access to the documents and have not received them. So we can file a Freedom of Information Law request, but it seems like a burdensome way to proceed. I see your counsel is here, and under the Freedom of Information Law, we should be entitled to the public records. So I would just like to make that comment, and we urge Mr. Fitzpatrick to perhaps contact us, or we'll file a Freedom of Information Law request. Now, getting to what is on the agenda for today, I understand that you have a presentation from one of the major Albany law firms to discuss potential representation of the town in connection with the Dominion project. And I just want to say that I recognize that this is an important decision for this town and for this community. And I would urge the planning board, and you may already be planning to do it, it's hard for us to speak in anticipation of what may be presented later because we don't know. But I would urge the planning board to talk to more than one firm and to really think about whether this particular firm is the right fit for you. And let me just say that in general, who pays the bills and what the experience and ethic of the law firm is makes a difference in the representation. I know some of us just think with a lawyer, you're going to be the client and you'll sort of tell the lawyers sort of what you would like to see accomplished, or maybe your consultant engineering firm will. But the lawyers also play a role. They give advice. They give counsel to the client. And in connection with counseling the client, who the law firm is, what their background is, and where their bread is buttered makes a difference. I don't know that this firm that is on the agenda tonight expects to ever get work from this town again, but they probably do expect to get work from Dominion Transmission Inc. or from other transmission, construction, natural gas or other fossil fuel transmission companies, compressor station constructors. So if I were you, I would ask closely, how many towns have you represented where there was community opposition to the project, where you fought with the town to modify a project or even to stop a project? Because there are firms, and I think the firm that you're considering here is associated with getting projects built, getting them done. They're known to represent communities where the planning board is already in favor of a particular project. So I think, as I said, you want to make a decision that everyone will feel comfortable with, that the feeling that there will be at least some neutrality in what's being presented, and that this law firm will not just be looking to who is planning to build this project and potentially hire them for another town in another location, but actually would be representing the interests of the town of Minden.
Anybody else?
Hello, my name is Susie Winkler. I'm from Burlington, New York. Sorry. I want to thank you for the opportunity. As frightening as the project that's in front of us is for this community, I believe that it may not be the end game. I believe that it's not the case by a long shot. I've talked about segmentation before. Just as you know that the Dominion line that came through Minden years ago was not the end game, And just as you know that the sleepy compressor that's been here for, I guess, about 12 years, now you know that that wasn't the end game. Because now you know that Dominion intends to triple the size of the compressor. Up until this point, it's run 1 day a week, portion of the year. You should know now that the project that's in front of us is going to run all day, every day. So we know that the compressor that's there now wasn't the end game. But just as you know, and I've explained in the past, that for the community of Minden, New York, the Millennium Pipeline was not the end game, nor was the compressor that was introduced to their community after the pipeline was built. Nor was the compressor the end game, because after the compressor was approved and was being built, that's when the Millennium Pipeline Company introduced the gas-fired power plant that will be built, is being built right now. It was approved 8 miles from the site of the compressor station, which is already making the community of Minden sick. So we know that projects are segmented into small bites so that communities will accept them. I'm here to urge this planning board and to thank you for all that you've done thus far. You've really worked hard to stick your neck out for this community, and I'm urging you to fight like hell against this project, because I don't believe it's the end game. Certainly the citizens of Myersville, Maryland learned that the Dominion Company was not there in their town to be a good neighbor. Dominion moved forward with a compressor that went online on November 1st of 2014. I think that it was about 15,900 horsepower. 14 days after the compressor went online. So it was built, went online November 1st, 2014. 14 days later, Dominion introduced their new application for another compressor at the station that doubled the horsepower of what was there, that had just gone online 2 weeks earlier. It's crazy. Let me just say that they are talking here about an entire web of pipelines that will put a stranglehold on the fossil fuel industry, on the renewable energy industry that we're hoping to build in New York State. And in fact, Dominion's agenda is to get the most gas out of our country and for export. And we just have to stop that pattern from happening. So please, fight like hell.
Anybody else? Bill?
My name's Phil Scalia from Minden. Oh, I'm sorry, did you want to speak?
No, you go ahead.
I'm reading some very disturbing reports, which unfortunately are not in the distant past. Here's a headline: Dominion cited for water pollution violations. This is from West Virginia DEP. 13 violations, citations, October 1, 2012 to February 28, 2014. They were issued requests for information beginning on June 2013, again October 2013. They had to be sent these by certified mail because they did not respond. It wasn't resolved until August of 2014. That took 14 months. They were fined a paltry $55,000. I guess that's cheaper than doing it right. Are these your plans for Brookman Corner? Could you please respond to that tonight if you speak, please? Currently, this is happening today. You're in violation by the U.S. Forest Service in Virginia and West Virginia, where you're cutting through national forests for improper survey work on the Atlantic Coast Pipeline. Is this what we have to expect here? We've had 2 blowdown situations in which you were in denial of. There was one in 2010 that you said never happened. You say check the Iroquois line. Well, now you are the Iroquois line. There was one 2 weeks ago. Jeff Smith is still trying to get information on that one. Is this what we're supposed to be expecting here? You find it more expedient to pay off local nonprofits with $5,000 checks hoping to buy their silence because that is less expensive than investing in less polluting equipment. That is standard and considered best available technology, which is what you bragged about in your application. You know, the 2,000-page document in which you did not mention the word Otsquago. I would like to inform the esteemed gentleman from the multinational fossil fuel company that your industry is entering senescence. Just ask the banks. They're betting against it. You are not in Virginia or West Virginia. You are in New York, and we do it better here. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Yes. My name is Marion Carl, and I live in the town of Middlefield. Instead of the existing single compressor at Brooklyn Corners that runs only occasionally during the week, Dominion is planning to triple the size of the facility with 4 compressors and 4 smokestacks running far more often, pumping nearly 100,000 tons of emissions into the air annually. Pollutants such as formaldehyde, volatile organic compounds, carbon monoxide, nitrogen oxide are sent into the atmosphere at levels that greatly exceed levels from other facilities in nearby counties. These are dangerous chemicals that can have serious acute and chronic health impacts. To add to the problem, Dominion has not yet fully addressed the so-called fugitive emissions from equipment that leaks over time, or other equipment like glycol dehydrators, which release massive volumes of gas all at once. The town of Minden is basically a rural township with a large percentage of the population living on farms. Among them, a significant number are Amish, very hardworking people who spend their whole lives immediately in the same area and work with their own hands. In fact, several of the Amish schools are in close proximity to the compressor station, and they would therefore feel the effect of these pollutants more acutely. It is a known fact that children are the most vulnerable to such pollution. I understand that there are ways these emissions can be reduced, and they are listed in depth in this pamphlet. I have several of them if people have not seen this pamphlet. An oxidation catalyst should be installed on all exhaust stacks, vapor recovery be required, and electric compressors be considered where possible. There should also be a credible dispersion modeling that takes into account unique conditions of Otsquago Creek and Valley, and there should also be a permanent air quality monitoring done by the DEC. I'm not a mechanically or technically trained person, but the conversations of my 3 brothers, all engineers, sometimes makes my mind spin. I am a nurse, and I was married to a doctor. The health and welfare of the community, especially children, and the environment in which they all live will certainly get my attention. So to hear of a very likely degradation of the environment leading to the possible damage to the health of the community, especially young children living there, is very disturbing. And even more so if there are proposed solutions that would help relieve the situation that are not even considered. Thus, it becomes a moral imperative for us to insist that Dominion make changes to its New Market project and reduce emissions from the proposed Brooklyn Corners expansion through better equipment, emission controls, and vapor recovery if this project moves forward. Thank you very much.
Anybody else?
No, go ahead.
Oh, well, my name's Keith Shue. I'm a technical advisor with Otsego 2000 and also with Mohawk Valley Keeper. I also live in the town of Cherry Valley, which is just about 5 miles from here. So You've heard a lot of folks who are very concerned, rightfully concerned, about what this project means to the community and what kind of emissions, what kind of impacts could be felt. Frankly, if I had my druthers, this would not be going forward at all. I actually do think there are better ways to produce energy than gas. But I am an engineer, and engineering is applied science. So by nature, I look for practical solutions to problems like this one. Therefore, facing the likelihood of this project moving forward in some capacity, I would be remiss. In fact, I feel that I would have an ethical problem of my own if I did not talk about ways that pollutants from this facility could at least be reduced if the project goes forward. Because quite frankly, those additional measures could make the difference between somebody's child having chronic nosebleeds and skin rashes, whether someone's father dies of cancer, whether a mother loses her baby to a miscarriage or birth defect. As proposed, this facility would by far be the most polluting in Dominion's entire New Market project, with formaldehyde levels that are 22 times higher than at the other facilities that Dominion wants to build in Madison County and Chemung County. VOC is 14 times higher, and it goes on and on. There are practical ways in which those emissions can be reduced. So what we're saying is, Dominion, be a good corporate citizen and accommodate some of the recommendations that we have made in writing to FERC, to the DEC, to the town board. And by the way, there are resolutions, many resolutions at this point that have been adopted by the town of Minden and other communities, all calling for improvements to this project if it moves forward. So seriously, let's talk about how those improvements can happen. One thing that's conspicuously missing from Dominion's proposal is an oxidation catalyst on its existing turbine. That's like the catalytic converter on your car. If this community is being asked to accept higher levels of emissions in the future, then how about going back and adding that to the existing turbine? It's a retrofit. It should be a no-brainer. And it would bring the total emissions of the facility down. That's not too much to ask. Or better yet, Dominion could simply pull out its existing Taurus 60 turbine and plug in a slightly larger one, the Taurus 70. That's the same unit that you all plan to install in Montgomery, in Madison County and Chemung counties. If you do that, then you wouldn't need the second turbine that you want to install here. You'd have 3 smokestacks instead of 4, and again, the total emissions would be brought down. Another easy to install, cost-effective, and fuel-saving measure that would actually pay for itself, that would be fuel-saving, is vapor recovery. Reciprocating engines, like are proposed here, are notorious for fugitive emissions because they have pistons, cylinders, rod packing that leaks, and those leaks get worse over time. Those are unburned hydrocarbons, methane and VOCs, that leak out the side of the facility. There's a company by the name of Remtech with technology called Slipstream that they actually have a process by which they manifold those fugitive emissions and feed them back into the air intake of the compressor. It's a whole lot like positive crankcase ventilation, PCV, which has been required on cars in this country since the 1970s. Everybody who drove to this meeting tonight should have a catalytic converter on their exhaust pipe and a PCV valve to recycle fugitive emissions. It's not unreasonable to ask Dominion to join us in the 21st century with those same technologies if this project goes forward. Again, we feel these are reasonable, cost-effective, fuel-saving improvements, and most importantly, they could significantly reduce emissions and better protect the people who live here. This is what we are hoping you will require as conditions if this project is approved. I'll just say one thing about the attorney they plan to hire. We hope that these solutions are solutions that that firm will also embrace and attempt to facilitate and, if necessary, fight for. If they're not willing to do that, then they're not the firm for you. So anyway, thank you for your time on this. One other thing I'll just pass out is it's something that's actually from the EA that recently came out by FERC, and it kind of gives you an idea of what the emissions from this facility are going to be like compared to other things. 120,000 passenger cars is the equivalent in terms of particulate matter emissions from this facility. Imagine 120,000 cars sitting there on that 50-acre site. Anyhow, I just thought that would be useful information to you. And relating to the Remtech technology, I'd like to share this with the folks of Dominion. I'd encourage you to take a look at it. again, cost-effective solution that I think could significantly bring the fugitive emissions down. Please consider it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
Dick Solberg, Hallsville, Fort Plain. Very nice, Keith. Excellent. I think we all know what the word steamroll is, and that's going to happen here. What we could ask Dominion to do is to put in the best material and equipment they can find. And one thing Keith didn't say is, how about a paltry $5 million in escrow? That's not too much to ask, really. And the town board can ask for that. And then that can go toward equipment for dealing with emergencies, hospitals, I don't know, whatever else could go wrong. Do you suppose anything can go wrong? Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yeah. I'm Cindy Campbell. I'm a nurse practitioner. I live in the town of Cherry Valley. I work in the school of Richfield Springs. It's not very far away as the crow flies and as the air pollution dissipates. And I didn't do my homework like many working people, and there's a lot of working people in this town who are not here tonight. I found out about this today, and I think a lot of other working people are busy home taking care of their kids. Rural lives are no less important than urban lives. This compressor station would never pass muster in a place where there were more people angry about it. But the people who live near it, the kids who are going to suffer respiratory effects, there's been some recent research about women having more miscarriages and preterm labors around the areas where there's hydrofracking. There's radiation levels. I think that it's very important that everything be done to recognize that this must be done. If it has to be done, it must be done as safely and with as little emissions as possible. We're going to live with it for a long time, and it's not just the few people in this room. We're talking about the whole area. I can't say it as eloquently as Marion. I can't say it with the research that Keith has put into it, but I can stand here and represent the people who will be concerned when the health effects show up if this group doesn't do their homework and make sure this is safe. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, yep, ma'am.
My name's Julie Huntsman. I live in Flat Creek in northern Otsego County. A little bit of an outsider, but as Cindy Campbell pointed out, you know, air, who's the air belong to? Air, it moves. So it's not crazy to think that it would degrade regional air quality. I'm here because I care about the environment. It's been a passion for many, many years, and about animal health and public health. And what's good or bad for them goes for us humans too. Getting to know a lot of the families up here in Minden, getting to care about them a great deal. It's good to hear them speak out. I think it kind of points to cost. And perhaps if Dominion Transmission wants to move forward with that plan as it is right now, because it's more cost effective for them, who's going to bear the cost of the fact that that's not the latest and safest technology? And the emissions are, if that goes forward, are much higher than they need to be. Well, who then bears that cost? Unless the company, the community does, of course, for decades. So unless the company were going to take care of the problems down the road, which there's no reason to assume that they would have no incentive to do that. But of course, and I want to commend y'all as public servants for letting people talk and acknowledge the difficulty of the task ahead of you, but to know that you have support, and the town passed a resolution, Montgomery County Legislature, Town of Otsego, Roseboom, Canajoharie, Village of Fort Plain, Sharon Springs. You're not alone, and we urge you to take a very strong stand for the well-being of your community. Thank you.
Anyone else? If not, we'll close the public hearing. Get on to the agenda. made an error. Okay, let's get on. Minden transmission.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Don Hauser from Dominion. And thank you for the members of the planning board to have us here once again after, I believe it was May when we were here the first time on the application. And at that time, after the transmittal of documents and some Q&A, we were awaiting the FERC EA to be released. And at that time, we didn't know when it was going to be released. We didn't have a schedule of EA published by the FERC. And since that time, as you're well aware, you have it now in hand. I believe you had hard copies overnighted to you, at least 2 to the town, and also electronically a link to download it yourself at your home. With that, I know that you've received a lot of documents from John Muncy of CT Mail, who's here with us. And John will take over discussing the updated documents that you've received from us and introduce the engineering team from Dominion who's here to answer any questions you might have on the plan.
Chairman Welch, thank you for having us here tonight. Planning board members, John Muncy with CT Mail, been working with Dominion Transmission and their predecessor company, CNG Transmission, since 1992. Also here tonight are representatives from the Richmond, Virginia office, Jamie Jacobs, senior engineer. Chad Major is another engineer that deals with operation construction. Daniel Buell is the project manager for Dominion. Gene Kelly, outside legal counsel from Harris Beach as well. We're here tonight to address any questions the planning board might have. As Dawn mentioned, this is the second meeting before the planning board for our application for site plan approval from the planning board. This process started out in March 3rd, submission to the code enforcement officer for a conceptual building permit application at the direction of the town, specifically with the request of is there a need to obtain site plan approval or not from the planning board. On March 12th of 2015, we submitted modified building plans to the code enforcement officer. After that, on April 8th, 2015, after being directed to apply for site plan approval, on April 30th, we made our initial application for site plan approval that put us on the agenda for the first meeting, May 11th, 2015. Since, as Dawn mentioned, the FERC has released the environmental assessment document on October 20th. Once that document was out, consistent with New York State policy, we used that as the basis for our Part 1 full EAF. We included that as an attachment to our Part 1 full EAF with the objective of using the federal NEPA decisional document as the basis for satisfying the State Environmental Quality Review Act requirements for the project, on the project. That Part 1 EAF was submitted along with the FERC EA in our last submission. There were some minor changes that were made to the site plan. Primarily, we did some infiltration tests. As a result of the infiltration tests, the stormwater management aspects of the project were defined better. We included that information in the revised site development plan submitted to the planning board. There were some minor changes that were made as well to the stormwater management calculations to provide a basis for the temporary and permanent designs of the systems for the site. So we're before you here tonight, and thank you for putting us on the agenda, with the request to consider first the potential adoption of a negative declaration of environmental significance for the project, and then followed by that, we would request that the planning board consider granting site plan approval for this project that's before you. The team is here to potentially address any questions that the planning board members might have about this document. The FERC EA is a lengthy executive summary document of a very large and detailed assessment of the environmental impacts associated with the project. I defer to Gene Kelly to say a few words about the NEPA FONSI and its significance for this project.
Thank you. Just for ease, I'm going to stay seated. I don't want to have my back to people more than I need to, if possible. The public comment period is open for another 10 days on FERC's environmental assessment. They've announced the 30-day period, and at the conclusion of that 30 days, if keeping with traditional FERC practice follows in this case, which there's no reason to believe it won't, that FERC will then go ahead with issuance of its certificate. That would be the final action. Associated with the issuance of that certificate would be an official finding by FERC of what's known as a FONSI, a finding of no significant impact. That's discussed at length in the environmental assessment. The environmental assessment, contrary to the gloss that some people are putting on it, is a very detailed and searching document that explores virtually any angle of the potential impacts from this project that you could imagine. So when FERC issues its final certificate with the finding of no significant impact, that is the conclusion of the federal NEPA process. The seeker, which is technically not applicable here because of the existence of NEPA and the Natural Gas Act, is satisfied by the adoption of a negative declaration that is contingent upon the final adoption by FERC of the EA. And as John said, there's nothing that would legally prevent the town planning board from issuing a negative declaration at any point, even prior to the final adoption of the EA by FERC, as long as that negative declaration was contingent upon final action by FERC. It's worth pointing out that both the main body of the environmental assessment as well as the health risk assessment that's associated with that environmental assessment contains a recommendation of finding of no significant impact. It's also worth pointing out that the emissions associated with any of the compressor stations that are part of this project would be subject to the normal DEC permitting regulations, and that this project appears to qualify not as a major source, but as a state facility, which means that the air emissions associated with this project do not rise to the level that necessitate a federal Title V Clean Air Act permit. It's permitted as a regular state facility. So that's about all I've got to say on that at this point. I will make one further point, that I was the regional director of DEC for the last 7 years in this area. And this project is unremarkable in any number of ways, not the least of which is the fact that this project qualifies as a state facility, not as a Title V. Title V are the very large facilities that have to be permitted under the Federal Clean Air Act. This does not have to be permitted under the Federal Clean Air Act. It qualifies for the state facility permit. So that's all I have to say on that. And I don't know if there's any questions that the board may have for any member of the team.
Well, as you know, we got thrown a curve 2 weeks ago by Mr. Hoggins. He has accepted a position in the Attorney General's office, so he cannot represent us. So we're in the processing now of looking for legal counsel. We also have sent a letter and an escrow agreement to Dominion. We've heard nothing back from that. I know there's some stuff going back between you and John here, the town attorney, that I know. And no money's been put in any finances set aside yet for anything. So at this point, we don't feel until we get people on board that can advise us that we can go ahead and make any, adopt anything or do anything at this point.
No, and thank you for pointing that out. I've had a couple of good conversations with Mr. Kirkpatrick, and in both of those conversations, I think I made it very clear that Dominion is not objecting to the establishment of an escrow funding mechanism to enable the town to bring the consulting prowess that it needs on board. You know, the only thing is we're asking that there be some transparency to it, obviously. That the kinds of fees that the town wishes to have Dominion fund are allowable under the town zoning code, obviously. And we would just ask that a process be established, obviously, so that we can be sure that the money that Dominion places into that account is being properly spent, and that there's a clear objective of which really has to be stated at the outset of what the consulting fees will be used for.
Anything else?
I just had a brief question. What is the intention of the escrow account, the funds in that?
To, for engineers and legal consultants.
Okay, to investigate this further before
Yeah.
such approval.
Yeah, to help us through the process
Understood.
and everything. Right?
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Anything else? Well done. Okay. Tonight we have a presentation from Young and Summers.
You want that done here?
Yeah, you snuck in on it.
Thank you, and I'm sorry I'm late when GPS decided to send me the back one, because I was coming from Delaware County. I appreciated the comments from the public questioning where our allegiances might lie and our expertise. It's a fair question, but I find it particularly humorous in my case. Young Summer, as a law firm, we were formed in 1999. We have been consistently ranked among the top 10 of environmental law firms in New York State by Chambers USA. We're not a big firm. We have a total of about 20 attorneys, but we get ranked higher or on par with the largest firms in the state. We are a unique firm in many respects, is that we represent literally all sides of environmental law. We represent the largest companies. We represent small companies, small developers. We have a very significant municipal practice where we both serve as regular town attorneys, but more often than not as special counsel, reviewing projects such as this when it comes in. And I have a particular niche where I'm one of the few private attorneys who does a lot of work representing citizens and environmental groups. So what we provide is the expertise to all of our clients of understanding what are the relevant laws, the relevant authority that a planning board like this will have on it, the questions you can raise, issues that you could address, and means of getting the conditions or approvals if you're inclined to do so. It is, we don't make the decisions, we just give you advice on how to do that. You, as the planning board, will make the decisions and we'll give you the guidance of what we do. I sent a list along through Steve, a sort of a quick snapshot of some of our current and past municipal clients. It's been a significant list. Personally, myself, since 1991, I have been counsel to the Coalition of Watershed Towns, which are the 40-plus towns and villages in the Catskills to make up the west of Hudson watershed. Negotiated the 1997 Memorandum of Agreement with New York City, which required it to amend its regulations that were respectful of the economic needs of the Catskill communities. Resulted in, depending on how you calculate it, $400 to $800 million in investments into the Catskill communities. We continue to represent them. In fact, that's where this meeting was coming from. It's a regular work. I was lead counsel for the opposition to the St. Lawrence cement plant in Hudson, New York in the early 2000s, which was successful. That went through a full DEC hearing. I've been special counsel to the town of Shandaken when it was reviewing the Bel Air project. that went through for the period, for only a few years on that because the administration changed. I have been the lead attorney for the opposition to the Atlantic Yards project in Brooklyn, which is where the Barclays Center is. I was partially successful on that. I was a lead opposition to the new Yankee Stadium. I'm currently involved in another major project involving the review of a 10-story condominium hotel buildings in Brooklyn Bridge Park. The firm represents, and we've been involved in major wind companies. We do a lot of siting for wind power throughout the state. I do not believe we have ever represented a natural gas company. I don't think we're interested in it. I do know we're advising Delaware County and some towns in Delaware County regarding, I guess, the Constitution pipeline. I have not been too much involved in that. I don't believe any of those sites or the towns that we're involved in have a compressor station, but I'm not sure. We do represent Global Petroleum on modifying their air permit for their Albany terminal. It has been characterized by environmental communities as bringing in the oil trains or the bomb trains. Those are already previously permitted and is not affected by this. This is just a boiler to allow the heavier crudes to flow better. But nevertheless, it is a major controversial project, and we're involved in litigation now with the state on that one. And I am closely involved in that. Like I said, we've represented a number of towns in reviewing projects. And the issue for the town, obviously, as you know, you've done this before, is you're neutral. You have to apply the laws as you have, and any of your decisions have to be supported by substantial evidence, and has to be within the legal parameters of what you can do. It's not, you're not in a position to be an advocate. You have to take everything as it comes to you and evaluate it as seeing, you know, how the laws fit with it, and we'll help you do that. That's what our expertise is. So I've talked a long time. If you have
Could
any
you state
questions-
your name? You didn't state.
Oh, I'm sorry, Jeff Baker at Young Summit. And what we can do is you can ask me questions that you're comfortable with in public. You can also, I'm going to refer to your counsel on this, go to executive session to have a full discussion in terms of, you know, interviewing and all that, since not necessarily all of your questions are appropriate for a public discussion at this point.
You say you have had some, the Constitution, and go through that again, what you said.
Yeah, our firm is representing some of the towns in Delaware County, reviewing some of those issues and giving them advice. I can't speak about great detail on it because I have not had much personal involvement on that. We have, sort of the reason I'm here is it's a matter of when you're representing a number of towns and with schedules, we have to juggle our schedules around. Rob Panache, one of my partners, has been involved in a lot down there, happens to be out of town today and tomorrow. He may also, on regular meetings, might have conflicts, so, you know, in some meetings I'll come for this, or my other partner, Jim Moscato. We use, you know, you pull from the strength of our firm. You're not hiring any of us individually. We all work together and share our expertise in different areas. We work with Barton LeJudas and Steve Lefevre, Jim Moscato, my partner, representing the town of Athens, right?
Town and village.
Town and village of Athens on the, before the PSC on the power interconnect power.
It was
project.
it's the proposed alternating current transmission upgrade project.
Yeah, with a transmission line going through Athens on that. And so, you know, that goes through the Public Service Commission. This is not governed by the Public Service Commission. In terms of specific issues, if we're going to get into on air impacts, one of the attorneys in my firm, Beth Morris, is the author of the Clean Air Act Handbook, which is one of the primary treatises that everybody uses to understand the Clean Air Act. As I say, she's one of the 6 people in the country who actually understands the Clean Air Act in all of the details. And she regularly briefs me on it, and I pretend I understand it. So.
For a process, you understand that completely?
No. We get involved with it occasionally. I will not pretend to be an expert on the FERC process. We get involved in reviewing periodically and the extent of federal preemption and to where the FERC process, limits your ability or where you have freedom to, deal with your issues. Generally, I can tell you, you don't have the ability to control the full pipeline. You're looking at localized issues that are related to the siting of the compressor station. I am very familiar with NEPA and seeker. That's my particular expertise. As Mr. Kelly pointed out, there's a FONSI that's going to likely be issued by FERC. FONSI is effectively the same thing as a negative declaration, if you're used to it. It is not binding on you. As a general rule, NEPA is not binding. It is a reference, it is a resource that you can look to for making a decision, but it is not binding, and I would caveat that statement on, we would have to look at the whole issues of the extent of preemption and FERC on those elements. And that's one of the things, if you decide to hire us, we'll look into that for you and give you advice as to basically what you can do. And what are the issues that you're required to look at and how you can do it.
Anyone else, sir? Questions? Nothing down there? Town board? Nobody? Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
With that said, at this time, I would make a motion to go into executive session to discuss the possible appointment of a special legal counsel in connection with the Dominion matter and to discuss the legal ramifications with the town attorney. Second.
I'll second.
Keith, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Jim, since you opened it up a little bit, let me just add that I was concerned by the presentation from the attorney from Young Summer because he spoke always in terms of what he has done. I have done this and I have done that. The decision you will make is the decision to hire this firm. This gentleman hopefully will be here once in a while, and hopefully he will give you advice to the best of his ability, and hopefully it will be consistent with the direction you want to go in. But you are hiring the firm. And I would ask them if they've done a conflict of interest check and find out how many transmission companies, compressor station companies, oil and gas industry companies, large producers of energy they have represented. It's going to be a long list. And you have the right to know that. You are not hiring him in his own personal resume. You're hiring the law firm. And you have to look at their resume because they're the ones that will have potentially slightly different interests. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to go into executive session. Unfortunately, we're going to be staying here, so that means everybody has to.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
We'll see you hopefully next time.
Hopefully we have something.
Is that everybody or somebody freeze out there?
It's all that's left.
Couldn't make it. Yeah. This is the hardcore, the ones that.
That's correct.
What?
What you know.
I'm just making notes for myself.
Anybody throw a motion on the floor to hire Youngs and Summers?
I'll make the motion.
Keith, second.
I'll second it.
Sue, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That passes. The next meeting is the December
14th.
December 14th.
About the zoning meeting.
And, yeah, and our workshop meeting is November 23rd. At which point Nan was supposed to be here. With that.
What is it?
24.
23rd, it's updated, yep, workshop meeting.
23rd,
Yep,
and then December 14th.
all right,
Yep.
anything else?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, do you expect Dominion to be on that agenda in the December 14th meeting?
We'll try.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Appreciate it.
Do you, Mr. Chairman, do we want to ask them about establishing the escrow account?
That's between Attorney and Dean Kelly, they've been
Okay.
talking back and forth. Yeah, that's something that's gonna have to be set up before.
You
Before,
need to
nothing
get
happens.
that funded so that we can start our reviews.
Yeah, and John and I have talked about that, and, you know, we're definitely interested in you know, progressing that discussion. In fact, if you want to talk after the meeting is done tonight, we can talk further on that if you wish. If you'd rather wait, we can wait.
Oh, you're looking for the information now that they're on board, right?
Yeah, what I
you're
discussed,
into.
what I discussed with you, I'll share with everyone. You know, that is that we would like to know what the scope of work will be, because there's obviously some things that we can agree to participate in the cost of, and there's others that we wouldn't be able to. And we'd like to have a mechanism in place so that we can see when the disbursements are being made and what it's being paid for, to make sure that the services that it's being paid for are consistent with what we're allowed to fund.
Is there a recognized practice that
Yeah, well, the
you do
normal
in those
practice,
cases?
the normal practices on that is, I mean, the scope of the work is we're advising the planning board on their review of your application. I mean, it's as limited as that. It's, you know, it's under the jurisdiction, you know, the scope of the zoning law, whatever that has, and I'm being vague because I haven't read it yet. And normally what happens is you're entitled, if you want to request an audit of any of our respective bills. You don't get pre-approval authority. You can file, if you think things are not appropriate, you file objections, and then the town basically, you know, reserves that or understands that there are objections out there.
Right.
You know, we have to redact things that are any privilege, but that's not usually much of an issue.
Sure.
But, yeah. So that, you know,
Well,
that's generally, you know, that's a standard.
And I saw Don Fletcher's letter, which talks about 10,000 for Barton and LaJudas, but we haven't seen any amount for the legal side of the project. So I don't know if you've.
We gave him a quote of, and it's just an amount, and I don't, you know, just to throw out there, because I think your escrow law provides for funding of the escrow amount in thirds, is my
Right.
understanding. So we put out 15,000. I honestly don't necessarily expect we'll get up there, but it depends what's going on. And obviously, anything that's funded and not used gets returned.
Until tonight, you know, we had nothing to present to you anyway, because of the legal. Down to it.
Well, I presume, we have a call scheduled for the morning, so hopefully after the call, perhaps I can get in touch with you and we can take the discussion further. You know, because like I said, we you know, our interests aren't served by this dragging on, obviously. We'd like to see it progress, so, you know, I'm interested in having that discussion so that we can move ahead.
Okay.
Gene, are you doing a coordinated seeker review
Well,
with DEC
You're-
and?
I don't even know that a lead agency has been established yet. I understand it's gonna be the town, right?
Well, only if it's a coordinated review. Is this an unlisted or a type 1 action?
I think it's a type 1.
Oh, it is?
I don't, but I don't know. I don't know what DEC is doing in this. I'm not allowed to have contact with DEC.
Right.
So, so, not until May
I
at
can
least.
ask John tomorrow. if you want.
Who's counsel to DTI for DEC?
It's Kevin Finto from Hutton and Williams.
Really? Okay.
Do you know Kevin?
No, I know the firm.
Okay.
From Richmond, obviously.
Yeah, I can obviously, you know, put you in touch with him if you'd like to have that discussion.
Yeah. Yeah. Have them call us.
Okay.
Or wait till I'm actually hired. Yeah.
Anything else?
I have a question if I could. Before we left for the executive session happened, good point was made about transparency, and I think Nicole Dillingham also asked the question about the availability of public records that the public would like to see. And I think what I heard the two of you say is that you were going to talk about that during the executive session. Was there some kind of decision made about how
No, that
public
wasn't,
records will be?
that was not discussed in executive session.
Oh, okay.
No, we're strictly on the other matter.
So that's, obviously, we have a significant interest in understanding how that's going to be handled, because the public does have right to those records. FOIL requests could be made every day if necessary, but I don't think that's really helpful if we can just have that information provided.
Can you, DTI, do you guys have objections to establishing a web page with a document repository on it? Putting on, the materials that your application materials?
I have to go back.
The answer should be no. I don't have an objection.
Well, no, there are some drawings that are sensitive. Internal station piping. I don't know if you have that. It should have been marked.
Confidential.
Right, that stuff would have been marked
Okay.
appropriately. So,
Right.
So we'll have to go back and take a look at what we submitted.
I would think the EA and most of your materials should be on there.
Certainly that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The FERC CDA we have, that's.
You've got
that's-
that.
well, that-
What else are you looking for?
made that public. The application that we heard was provided
Okay.
today.
I'll need a copy of that too.
I can make a copy of mine for him if you want, if that's easier for him.
I have another one.
The electron?
Do we have enough of these for everybody?
You got a copy for the public?
But, they're the ones flipping the bill. That's all I can tell you. Is it possible if you had extra copies of these? Mr. Muncy isn't here anymore now.
Yeah, John. If you would like an extra copy of what he submitted to you, I'll make sure he gets it to you.
Actually, we need, one planning board now doesn't have one, but see it myself. You haven't got one, right, Josh?
I don't have.
Right, so we actually need two here.
I can borrow Sue's.
And, no, three, sorry.
Going once?
Fourth would be nice.
All right. Anything else? Not looking for a motion for adjournment? So moved. Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? 125.
I don't have a vote, but I voted.